DA's office and Tom Wickman of the Boulder Police Department. This meeting was held at Mr. Hofstrom's office and Detective Wickman's request. An apology was given for the way the family had been treated. The Ramseys were asked to give additional interviews and continue their previous cooperation. John accepted their apology and agreed to move forward. No conditions were placed on the manner in which the interviews would be conducted, which is also not true because it's been stated in the police reports and amongst other places that the Ramseys did agree to interview only on their terms. Mm-hmm. It has been stated multiple times. On April 12, 1997, the Ramseys agreed to let the authorities search their house again without a warrant, agreed to destructive testings of walls located in their homes, agreed to identify Patsy Ramsey's prior writings, and agreed to make themselves available for separate interviews on April the 23rd. The Ramseys also agreed to answer any questions put upon them, and on April 22nd, the Boulder police canceled all these interviews. Well, there was never any destructive testing because there was never any holes in any of the walls. You can look at any of the pictures that were taken of the home. That never happened. They were never allowed to search. They were not going to search the home without a warrant. They can't do that. It's illegal, and it would not be held up in a court of law should this go to trial. So they would have not done it without a warrant. That just wouldn't even if the family said so. In this high-profile case, they would have gotten a search warrant. Can they search without a warrant with the family saying that they can? Yes, but I'm doubtful in this type of case. But it could have happened. I'm not saying it didn't, but highly unlikely. The Ramseys agreed to be interrogated by Boulder Police and District Attorney's Office at the District Attorney's Office on April 30th, 1997. These interviews lasted 2 hours, 2 hours for John and 6 hours for Patsy. They were interrogated by the District Attorney's Office for 3 full days in June 1998. No additional interviews were ever requested. Now, notice they were interrogated by the District Attorney, not by the Boulder Police. Yeah. So, again, another control factor. We're going to only ask you the questions, and this is what, So, yeah, we don't know what was asked. How can you, we have certain questions that we couldn't ask. So, it's very, very, very convoluted. They signed more than 100 releases for information requested by police, ranging from medical records to credit card records, even videotape rental records. The Ramseys provide all evidence information requested by the police, which is not true because they would have had police records to show exact times certain things were called and certain, and financial records, and they were known whether or not the father called, John Ramsey called the police, they're his pilot and stuff like that. So I have to I don't think that's true, but again, this is based on the information. Burke Ramsey, John Andrew Ramsey, and Melinda Ramsey Long, all were subpoenaed and testified before a grand jury. But then it also states in other documents that they're not. So, okay, what's the truth, what's not? So that's what I'm saying, it's going back and forth, because you've got one evidence from the police saying this, and you've got DA saying this. Neither one of them, their stories always contradicted each other, because one was looking for outsiders, one was looking at insiders, and the DA was doing their level best to disprove the insider theory as best they could, because I think were being paid off by the Ramsey family. John and Patsy were offered to testify before the grand jury, but were never subpoenaed. The Ramseys were asked to meet with the governor and his advisor, or asked to speak. The Ramseys asked to meet with the governor and the advisory counselor, but the request went unanswered. The governor basically said that I don't feel that it's appropriate for me to meet with you. One theory is that Patsy struck JonBenet in a fit of rage after a bedwetting episode and strangled her to cover it up. What happened after mistakenly thinking she was already dead. Theoretically, the strangulation could have been a red herring aspect to conceal other elements of assault and killing. Burke, who was 9 years old at the time of JonBenet's death, was interviewed by investigators at least 3 times. It was 3 times. In May of 1999, the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, I'll get those words out, reiterated that Burke Ramsey was not a suspect. The Ramseys offered $100,000 rewards in a newspaper ad dated on April 27, 1997. 3 days later, more than 4 months after the body of their daughter was found, they submitted for the first time to a separate formal interviews at the Boulder County Justice Center. 4 months after their daughter. I still can't get over that. 4 months it took them to come in for formal interviews. But yet, earlier on, as you saw, I read earlier, they said, oh yeah, we submitted all these dates for all these interviews. But yet, it is documented that they didn't come in until April of 97. So you can see right there in itself the contradictory, right there. In 1999, Governor Bill Owens spoke out, telling the Ramsey couple to quit hiding behind their attorneys and quit hiding behind their PR firm. Get up, step up, pull up their big girl panties and their underwear and, face the situation. Unfortunately, they never did. A Colorado jury voted in 1999 to indict the parents. The indictment cited 2 counts of each of child abuse, said the parents did unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly, and feloniously permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation that posed a threat to injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenet, a child under the age of 16. Now, that can work because if it in fact was that Burke that hit her over the head, killing her, and he had already hit her in the face with a golf club, and there was a lot of episodes of his violent behavior, and they as parents are responsible for keeping all children safe. If this is going on and he's continually to abuse JonBenet and put the fecal matter all over the place, that's leaving her in an unsafe environment, which is illegal, which is basically what that is saying. And because they didn't step up and take responsibility, it resulted in JonBenet's death. Among the experts who testified in the case were specialist Barry Scheck and forensic expert Henry Lee. Now, Henry Lee is the top forensic investigator in the country. He is phenomenal. He is awesome. He did, O.J. Simpson's. He's done so many cases across this country. He is awesome. And he's also one of the people specialists that were in the documentary.
I was going to ask if he was.
Yeah, he is awesome.
I thought the name was familiar.
But when he came in, the parents were fighting him to come in, knowing his level of expertise. Mm-hmm. But on October the 13th, 1999, Alex Hunter, who was district attorney at the time, refused to sign the indictment, saying the evidence was insufficient for prosecution. The public thought the grand jury investigation had been inconclusive. The grand jury's vote to indict was not revealed publicly, until October 25th, 2013. So how many years later? 13 years later. Approximately 13 years later. When previously sealed court documents were released. The case of JonBenet Ramsey, that's the documentary that Barbara and I have been talking about over and over again. A show that broadcast on CBS on September 18th and 19th of 2016, around the 20th anniversary of her murder, used a group of experts to evaluate the evidence. The group theorized Burke hit his sister in the head with a heavy object, possibly the mag flashlight, after she stole a piece of pineapple from his bowl, perhaps not intending to kill her. They suggested that the ransom letter was an attempt to cover up circumstances in JonBenet's death. We lost one child, we're not going to lose the other, so we're going to stage it and cover it up to protect Burke. They suggested that the ransom letter was an attempt to cover up circumstances of JonBenet's death. On behalf of Burke Ramsey, his counsel filed for a defamation lawsuit against CBS, producers of the program, and several of its participants, based on many of its claims. The second, by the way, that lawsuit, the defamation lawsuits, were all thrown out of court. Mm-hmm. So it never stuck. There are a couple of things that were settled out of court, but were never discussed. But the vast majority of it was thrown out. Oh.
And on that, you had said that they were trying to cover up what Burke did, but he wouldn't have been arrested for that. He would have been put in therapy and all kinds of other things.
They actually knew the laws, a child that's under the age of 10 cannot be prosecuted for murder. It will be thrown out. They're probably going to get community service or therapy and things of that nature, but they're not going to be charged with murder. So their cover-up was needless. Nothing would have happened to Burke. But again, remember the Ramsey family is all about appearances. Oh no, we couldn't have the world know that our 10-year-old boy killed our 6-year-old daughter. Oh no, we can't do that. So
and also it could be why he was never diagnosed for any of his things.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
image.
The second theory is the intruder theory. The police and prosecutors followed the leads for intruders partly due to the unidentified boot mark left in the basement room where JonBenet's body was found. If the Ramseys didn't do it, then who did? There were two main theories. First is that JonBenet was murdered by an unknown assailant who entered the home, presumably via the basement window. JonBenet was found wrapped in a blanket and lying in the middle of the basement floor. She had duct tape across her mouth. She lay with her arms above her head, and the white cord was wrapped tightly around her neck with a garrote, and the same cord tied loosely around her wrists. The broken handle of a paintbrush measured approximately 4.5 inches in length had been looped through the cord to form a garrote. At the time of her death, JonBenet was wearing a sweatshirt over a long-sleeved shirt. The lower half of her body was clad in white pajama bottoms over white panties. There was a thin gold ring on her middle finger of her right hand and a bracelet with her name engraved on one side and the date 12/25/1996 on her left wrist. A red heart was drawn on the palm of her left hand, and around her neck was a gold chain with a single cross attached. The evidence suggests that someone took the girl from the bedroom by force, lured her into the kitchen with a promise of food, her favorite food in the case being pineapple, which would explain the undigested remnants of the pineapple found in her stomach at the time of her death. She was then taken to the basement, had tape placed over her mouth, and was bound with a nylon cord. Then she was then sexually assaulted, after which she was strangled with a garrote and bashed about the head. The killer or killers then wrote the 2.5-page ransom note on a pad from the house, demanding the $118,000 and left the foot of the staircase. If this theory is correct, the killer would have had to be someone who is familiar with the layout of the house, where everything is, where this paintbrush was, where the marker was, where this pad was, the back staircase, where JonBenet's bedroom was. They also would have to know the Ramseys personally enough to know that John Ramsey would receive a bonus of $118,000. Is small enough to have gained entry through a narrow basement window and is possibly exited the same way. This window was very tiny. As you can see in the documentary, they show the window, and there were spider webs on that windowsill. Had someone gone through there, they would have disturbed those cobwebs.
They had was she part of the team?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they had her go through it. She was a very slight woman. She went through there, and it disturbed the cobwebs.
So, in that theory, it shouldn't have been possible for anybody to go through that window, and not disturb it, because those pictures were taken right after the body was found, and it showed the cobwebs still intact.
Mm-hmm.
Was confident enough to spend time to not only commit the offense, but to have the presence of mind to write a long note in an attempt to draw suspicion away from himself or herself. Former FBI agent and criminal profiler Robert Ressler believes that JonBenet knew her killer. The killer could have come from a small circle of friends around the Ramsey home in Boulder, and the circle would include family, neighbors, employees of the Ramseys. So it could have included John Andrew, even the family itself. Ressler's analysis is further strengthened by an excerpt from the letter of resignation that Detective Lou Smith's veteran investigator of 32 years' experience sent to the District Attorney Alex Hunter. The evidence observed by police at the scene strongly suggests that the attack came from someone outside the home. For instance, a footprint made by a high-tech stamp hiking boot found on the concrete of dust in the wine cellar. The boot has not been connected with any of the Ramseys or the 400 people or more that have been in and out of the Ramsey home. An unidentified palm print was found on the door of the wine cellar. It does not belong to John, Patsy, or Burke. But it could belong to John Andrew. Mm-hmm. They never tested it. Pubic hair found on the blanket in which JonBenet was wrapped. It does not belong to John, Patsy, or Burke. Again, it could be John Andrew. I keep coming back to that because they never investigated him. And I'll go into more detail a little bit why I think it's John Andrew. I have a reason for saying that, and I'll tell you guys that in just a few moments. A piece of broken glass found under the basement window. The window was open and the windowsill showed signs of disturbance. There was a scuff mark on the basement wall below the window. Someone had to have climbed in or out of the window. However, no footprints were found inside the window. Duct tape and the cord that was used in the murder were not found in the Ramsey house. The offender must have brought them in and taken them out when she or he left the house after the murder. The list of possible suspects in this case is enormous. Not only do the Ramseys have hundreds of guests through their home at various times, they also have a large number of tradespeople that work extensively in remodeling project on the house. One theory suggests that because the Ramseys had given a number of house keys to friends, one of them may have been responsible. If that is true, then why would the killer bother entering the house via the basement window? Mm-hmm. Assuming that is where the entry was made. Early persons of interest include Bill Reynolds, who played Santa Claus, Chris Wolf, a local reporter, whose then-girlfriend reported him as a suspect, family housekeeper Linda Hoffman Pugh, a man named Michael Helgoth, who Barbara talked about earlier, who died apparently of suicide shortly after JonBenet's death. Hundreds of DNA tests were performed to find a match to the DNA recovered during her autopsy. In 2003, a defamation lawsuit related to the case, Wolf versus Ramsey, involving the Ramseys publicly identifying an early suspect in the case, Judge Julie E. Carnes wrote, "There is virtually no evidence to support Wolf's theory that the Ramseys murdered their child. The abundant evidence to support the Ramseys' belief that an intruder entered their home at some point during the night of December 25th, 1996, and killed their daughter." Lou Smith, a detective in the case, assessed the evidence and concluded that the intruder had committed the crime. On the night of JonBenet was killed, there had been 2 windows left slightly open to allow for electrical cords for outside Christmas lights to pass through, a broken window and one unlocked door. Smith's theory was that someone entered the Ramsey home through the broken basement window. Critics have questioned this theory because of the intact cobweb in the base of the basement window. The steel grate of the window covered by the window also had undisturbed cobwebs, and the foliage around the grate had been undisturbed. There are also no cobwebs in the tracks of various windows, the dust and the debris on some of the sills. Smith believed that the intruder subdued JonBenet using a stun gun and took her down to the basement. JonBenet was killed and a ransom note was left. Smith's theory is supported by former FBI agent John E. Douglas, who had been hired by the Ramsey family. Believing the Ramseys were innocent, Smith resigned from the investigation on September 20th, 1998, 5 days after the grand jury had convened against the Ramseys. While no longer an official investigator in the case, Smith continued to work on it until his death in 2010. The attorney's office investigating pedophiles indicated to former Denver prosecutor Craig Silverman that the district attorney's office followed the intruder theory. The Ramseys developed a relationship with District Attorney Mary Lacey and her office. And I wonder why. Money talks. It always does. Which was criticized by authorities such as City Mayor Leslie L. Durgan. Gordon Combs joined the office as an investigator under Lacey, and when they were testing JonBenet's clothing for touch DNA. He also said that Lacey strongly supported the intruder theory and talked about it with staff. Although he was not directly involved in the case, he said he was told not to voice opposition to the theory because he might lose his job. It seemed weird, the whole premise of this attempt to influence the entire agency, he said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, he made that comment saying, not all the evidence was used, and soon after he was fired. So, again, a lot of suspicion. Lots and lots of suspicion.
I had forgotten that Smith's passed away in 2010? Mm-hmm. Because I thought, in all of this, when all the other, the documentary and all that came out, how come he didn't come out and say, wait a minute, okay, I've been bamboozled. Let me add it again, to recover his reputation. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Well, the fact that he passed away then, okay.
Yeah, and probably afterwards, when things came out and stuff, he's like, I don't want anything more to do with it. They probably just basically put blinders on to anything.
I don't want to hear it.
I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, because he came out of retirement for church. Mm-hmm. For the church. Okay, so he probably just picked, all right, I'm going to unretire.
I'm unretired. I'm going to go back. Yeah. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Another thing that also was a big factor was time of death. And we're going to get into that here in just a second. A factor to consider is the time that JonBenet died. The normal body temperature of a human is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The body gradually cools after death, and the rate of cooling is determined by the ambient temperature around the body and by the victim's body size and the clothing that the victim is wearing. The temperature of the body is normally taken rectally by a medical examiner, as the buttocks, being the largest area of a body's mass, are the last area to retain body heat. Body heat dissipates from a deceased person approximately 1.5 degrees per hour, but will vary according to temperature in the room and to the age and gender of the victim. The rate of advancement of rigor mortis is another method to use to determine time of death. Rigor mortis is the stiffening of muscles caused by chemical changes in the muscle tissue after death. The onset of rigor mortis normally begins within 2 to 4 hours after death and takes between 6 to 12 hours for the entire body to be affected. Normally, after 24 to 36 hours after death, the effects of rigor mortis have dissipated. According to the police report, JonBenet was last seen alive at approximately 10 p.m. On December 25th, 1996, John Ramsey, in company with Fleet White, found JonBenet dead in the basement approximately at 1:05 p.m. on December the 26th, 1996. When police first sighted the body, they observed the body was affected by advanced rigor mortis. Rigor mortis is known to spread through lesser muscle parts of the body first and gradually spread through the body, affecting larger body parts last. John Ramsey found JonBenet at 1:05 and her body temperature was completely set with rigor mortis, which indicates that she had died between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 6 a.m. on December the 26th. Police also reported a smell of decomposition on the body. Again, the rate of decomposition depends on room temperature, the body levels of bacteria, and enzyme activity. Typically, for every 10-degree increase in a room temperature, the rate decomposition is doubled. For the odor of decomposition to have been detected by police, JonBenet would have died near the beginning of the estimated time, around between 10 and 11 p.m. that night, which only gave, again, going back to what I said earlier, 1 hour. Yeah. To do all of that, I don't think so. I really don't. On October 13th, 1999, Alex Hunter called for a press conference to announce that the grand jury had been assembled 13 months previously to hear the evidence of the case, had found that there was insufficient evidence to charge any suspect with the murder of JonBenet, apart from John and Patsy Ramsey. The police never publicly named any additional suspects in their case. 3 weeks after Hunter's announcement, Colorado Governor Bill Owens told interviewers that he still considered John Ramsey a prime suspect in the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. Owens made the statement after John Ramsey had offered to meet with him in an attempt to convince the governor to appoint a special prosecutor to oversee the case. The governor declined the offer, stating, "Mr. Ramsey is considered to be a prime suspect. It'd be very inappropriate for me to meet with him." You can't go to the president, you can go to the governor, who's the highest ranking official in every state. The governor wasn't the only public official to point a finger of blame, and newly appointed Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner stated that, as far as he was concerned, the Ramseys were still under a umbrella of suspicion. Governor Owens was within his rights when he suggested that the Ramsey quit hiding behind their attorneys and cooperate with investigators looking into their daughter's killer, no matter where the trail may lead. The city of Boulder and the state of Colorado spent a combined total of $2 billion, over $2 billion, over 3 years investigating the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. Those funds only a minuscule of those funds, a little over $25,000 remained, which was used to keep the grand jury prosecutor Michael Caine on retainer, even though he had moved to Pennsylvania, and to keep Hunter's spokeswoman Susan Larion on his staff in a reduced capacity, essentially basically keeping up their game. As long as they were on staff, everything that they put into play in the Ramseys would remain protected as long as those people were there. He further claimed that they had remained with the investigation. If he had kept my mouth shut and followed every request of the prosecutors in the Boulder District Attorney's Office, but instead he clashed with prosecutors throughout much of his command of the investigation into the death of JonBenet. Alex Hunter appeared on CNN's Larry King Live and told King that he didn't want John or Patsy to take a polygraph test. The problem with them is reliability. He said, stating that various factors, including medications, could affect heart rate, blood pressure, perspiration, creating false reading. Hunter also disputed claims by the Ramseys that they never had taken a polygraph. They asked both of them if they wanted to take a polygraph, she said. There may be some confusion about semantics, but the human eye would lead you to believe that they were asked. While Hunter was forthcoming about most issues, there were some that he refused to comment on, such as whether a grand jury had investigated the case, wanted to issue indictment, which we all know later on that they did. What were the results of the DNA examination of JonBenet's fingernails and her underwear, and whether there was any evidence indicating JonBenet had been sexually molested. He would only say that the work was continuing on the case, and the work, which included new analysis techniques being applied to the ransom note, had indicated that it was the most important piece of evidence they had. John Mark Carr was arrested in Bangkok, Thailand on August 15, 2006, which would be the 10th anniversary of her death. Followed a false confession to murdering JonBenet. Carr, a 41-year-old school teacher, claimed to have drugged, sexually assaulted, and accidentally killed JonBenet. According to CNN, authorities also say that they did not find any evidence linking Carr to the crime scene. In the confession, Carr provided only basic facts that were publicly known and failed to provide any additional convincing details. The claim that JonBenet was drugged further cast doubt on the confession because autopsy indicated no drugs were found in her body. Furthermore, Carr's DNA did not match the DNA found on JonBenet's body. In September of 2016, the case of JonBenet, Ramsey, again the documentary that we've been talking about, television program, forensic pathologist Werner Spitz accused Burke Ramsey of killing his sister. On October 6, 2016, Burke filed a defamation lawsuit against Spitz. Burke and his attorneys, who included Lynn Wood, sought a total of $150 million in punitive and compensatory damages. Wood said that he would also file a suit against CPS at the end of October 2016, which obviously never happened. On December 28, 2016, Burke Ramsey lawyers filed additional civil lawsuit that accused CBS and production company of Critical Content, LLC, and 7 experts and consults of defamation of character. They sought $250 million in compensatory damages and $500 million in punitive damages. But through it all, again, one important factor has been pushed further and further and further into the background. An innocent little girl, 6-year-old little girl, was killed in a brutal manner, and her killer still remains unknown. So all the speculation, all this, he said, she said, they did this, she did this, the DNA against the police, all this, everything, the little girl who's behind it all has still been forgotten, and her case is still left unknown. Her murder is still unknown. So 3 suspicious events point to an intruder. Unknown vehicles parked outside the Ramsey home at the time of the crime. JonBenet's comment that she was going to get a special visit from Santa Claus. And even though Patsy never heard JonBenet say anything about a visit from Santa, even though she never heard anything about a visit from Santa Claus. On November 19, 2002, the Rocky Mountain News reported that an unknown male DNA recovered from JonBenet's panties could have been left on the garment at the time the clothing was manufactured. In exploring that theory, investigators obtained unopened control samples of identical underwear manufactured in Southeast Asia, tested them, and found human DNA in some of those new unused panties. At the end of 2002, Boulder Police Department announced it will no longer investigate the case despite new leads and new information. The Boulder investigators have transferred the investigation to the District Attorney's Office, which, ironically, in 2016, it was brought back to the Police Department. So it's bouncing back between both entities. But at the end of 2002, Boulder Police, an additional information gathered from a 911 call, and like I said earlier, there's a lot of information that was taken from there. The 911 operator wasn't allowed to say anything. A lot of speculation. Ramsey have given police records before interrogation. DNA blocked. G.A. Black getting phone records, financial records. You know, it's insane how much stuff was done to divert the real issues and stuff. And, you know, you're probably wondering what my personal history is on this. Other than seeing JonBenet, I actually had a run-in with John Andrew. I was actually in Colorado visiting Greeley. I was in Greeley, Colorado, the University of Northern Colorado. And I had gone over to CU, where John Ramsey was a student. It was at one of those little student meet and greet things where, because I was a senior in high school and I was looking at colleges and stuff, trying to figure out where I wanted to go. And it was a little meet and greet thing to visit, to get to know other students, get to know the campus, that kind of stuff. And while I was there, this young man came up to me, said, "Oh man, this guy's cute." He seemed clean cut, seemed nice. And within 5 minutes, that whole thing completely changed. He came up to me and he started talking about his sister and how much I looked like his sister. And after a minute or two, I finally came to pass that his sister was 6 years old. That of JonBenet. I didn't know at the time it was JonBenet, but he was talking about his 6-year-old sister. And then it was even creepier when he said, "I can live all my fantasies about my sister through you." Okay. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to just go over here. So I left and went over there. And it wouldn't be until after JonBenet's murder when I saw the picture of John Andrew. I'm like, that's the creepy guy that I bumped into at the mix. And about a few years later, when I was actually at Front Range Community College in Fort Collins, I had a dear friend there named Matt, and he and I were actually on a trip to the southwest of our country on a Southwest history class trip. And, you're sitting in a van and you just start talking about random things. And we happened, because it was still really heavily in the media in Colorado, we started up talking about JonBenet. And he's like, "Yeah, myself and my older brother was best friends with John Andrew." And I'd been friends with him too, and we'd been in and out of the Ramsey home and knew the family and stuff, and was telling me all sorts of stories about what had happened in the home, and Patsy's analness when it came to had everything pristine. When you walked in the door and saw the things on either side, it had to be pristine, but when you went back into certain other rooms, it wasn't as pristine as it should be. What happened to the maids, whatnot. Yeah. So in her odd behavior and her emotional up and downness and stuff. But they also said that Matthew's brother Michael, who apparently had been the dorm mate to John Andrew for a period of time, said that, the thing that caused him to kind of back away about being friends was they had a wardrobe in there. And when you're high school in lockers, you have pictures and things in your locker door. Well, inside of this wardrobe door of John Andrews were pictures of his sister, of
a shrine.
He had hair clippings and fingernail clippings. He had, I think it was a little glove from one of her beauty pageant costumes, and pictures.
All the made up ones.
But he even had some pictures
the regular ones?
He had some other pictures of her that you could tell he was hiding behind something. They were almost stalkery type pictures that he had of her. But it was really creepy that he had all these pictures of his sister. And when he would talk to people about JonBenet, it was a very pedophilic, obsessive, creepy way. And it was like, okay, this person's really obsessive of this. This is creepy.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, and living up there, my dad, talked a lot about this case and was part of it. It became part of my personal history. Those couple of events, bumping into him. And I actually did see him when I was at Greeley at a concert at Greeley. It was Stroke 9 had come, and I remember the song was playing. It was My Little Black Backpack by Stroke 9. It was live music going on. It was a party that the University of Northern Colorado was holding for its students. And, I was there, and I happened to see John Andrew walked from one side of the room to the other and was groping girls who had barely didn't have, no chest or anything, no breasts, very much, flat-chested, and groping and trying to manhandle them. And apparently he got hit and was escorted out by security, and I had actually seen that. So he had He had.
Was he drunk?
I don't know.
I would think that would be the only way he could even think that he could.
Well, he would come up behind them. The girls didn't see him, but he'd come up behind them and try to, grab their chests and feel them up and stuff. But I don't know. I wasn't paying that much attention. But this is.
But the fact that you could see that from across the room.
Yeah, well, I saw the girls push him away, and then finally security was called, and life went on. So I had my experience with that, and I'd hear the stories. It was like, again, it was part of my family, and hearing it from Matthew, and then seeing JonBenet herself. Again, this is it affected me. And the fact that it was never solved. It was in my home state. I was like, I want this solved. This needs to be done. This needs closure. This little girl needs justice some way and somehow. And it's always has been one of those cases that has remained with me since I started my career and stuff like that. Being a profiler and forensic psychologist, and a behavioral analyst. This is the case that just kind of keeps pushing me along. Seeing her little face and not having justice, and amongst other things, of course, that I've talked about in my own personal life. Have pushed me on to this, but this one really did. And the fact that it's unsolved and that has a black mark in Colorado, I want it solved, and I want her to be able to rest in peace, because she's not until this murder is solved, and it can be solved if people will just open up their mouths and talk. It can be. It's time. It's been almost 30 years now.
Yeah, how many of those people from the college mixers and stuff like that encountered him, and they could come.
But then I have to go, and this is where a lot of people, were talking about, JonBenet's death and that, or sexual abuse of JonBenet. And you have to separate it in two different cases, because I think that JonBenet was sexually abused by John Andrew and possibly her father, because of the bedwetting and amongst other things. But I think those two murdered JonBenet. No, I don't. I think that they sexually abused her. Oh, heck yes. I think there's a lot of crap going on in that home, and I think she was sexually abused by that, hence leading up to the bedwetting and all that stuff. I think that it was actually Bert that did it. I think it was an accident, and I think that the parents panicked. We lost one, we're not going to lose the other. And I think that they were trying to cover it up, and knowing that, we got to cover up, to protect John Andrew. I think that's why they chased John Andrew away and kept him down in Atlanta and then, I guess, in Michigan. I think that they were trying to protect him, too, because they didn't want him to be charged with sexual abuse, just like they didn't want Burke to be charged with murder. So I think all three of those men had something to do to harm and kill JonBenet Ramsey.
And also the blocking the phone records, because I also read that I don't know if it was an interview or something, he had said that when he was contacted that she was kidnapped, so first thing in the morning, John Andrew was supposedly flying from Atlanta to Michigan, because that day they were supposed to all meet there as a family. And he was at the airport. And when he found out she was kidnapped, supposedly, that he changed his flight and flew to Colorado, because he was actually there with the family during all the hubbub.
There was also speculation that he was at that party the night before. There was some pictures and video that looks like him. So there's been speculation that he was already there, and that the private jet. If there's a call put into the private jet because of the unknown car that was there, that somebody called a friend of his. Yeah. One thing that I actually had in this was that there was the maid had made a comment that a couple weeks before, or a week or so before JonBenet's murder, John Jr. was in the office, at the home office with Dad, having a very volatile argument. And about money and paying off a debt what appeared to be what I believe is a drug debt, because there was a lot of rumors that he was on drugs, and by drugs on Pearl Street, which there were a lot of drug dealers. You never know, because they don't look like him. They look like a preppy kid selling drugs. But, and that he needed to pay off his drug dealer and didn't have the money and was wanting that. And so to pay it back, say, hey, I'll give you my sister, as a compensation for this, and they went too far and she was murdered, and then he had to tell the parents, which had to which would fit the intruder and outsider theory, and would match the handprint in the boot if that is the case. So that is a theory that hasn't been ruled out. It's my theory, my speculation, based on the evidence at hand, if you don't want to use Burke. So, there's a lot of information that you can prove one way or another, but you have to have both in play. In order for the intruder parts to fit, you have to have an insider to facilitate and to because there's enough evidence that it would have to be an intruder based on what John Sr. was getting for his bonus and stuff like that. So that is what we think. But again, the sexual abuse stuff has to be separated from her death. Yes, she was sexually abused, but it was not a normal thing. She was being abused, or she was sexually abused by, or penetrated by objects, not human flesh, that we know of.
Yeah.
The day she was murdered, based on the autopsy. However, I believe that she was abused in prior times. Because they did try to get the pediatrician records and they were blocked that way too, which would have shown speculation. Even the pediatrician speculated there might have been sexual abuse, but they was not allowed to release the records because of HIPAA. So,
yeah.
But that can be negated in a criminal investigation. So, again, that's my history with this. It's a part of my life. It's been a part of my life. And that's my theory on it too. And I think that's, if you really want to combine both of them, that's the only way it's going to work. It really, and it fits, John leaving in the middle of the night, the screeching the tires that the neighbors saw, because the neighbors were never asked or talked to her. They were not allowed to.
Yeah.
But there was some made the comments that they heard screeching of tires, cars flying away in the middle of the night, and that would fit that. If the drug dealer took off and then they had to get rid of John Jr., and then they had to, and the fact that they never tested John Jr.'s DNA, and they never interrogated John Jr. either. So there's a lot of speculation. Again, as I said, this case is one to remember. So it truly, truly, truly is. So everyone, we come to the end of our delving and digging in the JonBenet case. We thank you for listening and taking this journey with us as we delved into the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. If you have any tips or information about the murder, please call the numbers that we have listed below. Remember, you can call and give your information or tips anonymously. So anybody out there in Boulder who has an NDA or a gag order, you can submit it anonymously. Anything helps. Every tip and every bit of information can lead us closer to finding closure for the family and to bring those guilty of taking this beautiful young girl's life to justice. So if you know something, anything, please, please, please call. It's not too late.
Call the Boulder police, not the DA.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So next time we have another riveting case for you, the creepy and mysterious case of Kirk Sova. He was a 17-year-old who disappeared in Ohio, and several days later he turned up dead under some very creepy and mysterious circumstances in 1981. The case remains unsolved but active. More on Kurt and his story next time, so please join us. You'll be riveted. I know I was. I'm sure Barb was too. And if you ever remember Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, this one is the one that creeped you out. I guarantee it. Trust me, I guarantee it. Anyways, as always, thank you so very much for your support. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. If you have any cases you want us to cover from your part of the world or country, please comment below and mention if we're allowed to use your name or handle if we choose to use your story. That is all we have for you today. Our next episode about Kirk Sova will be posted in about 2 or 3 weeks, give or take. Please, everyone, stay safe out there, and remember, be observant of your surroundings and of those around you. Take care out there, everybody. So until next time, my name is Juliana.
And Barb.
Signing off. Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.